Hello? Can you hear me? I'm lost. I don't know what's happening anymore, but if I could change it all, I would. It's all because of that cursed tape. I don't even know why the hell I brought that damn tape home. Probably it was just the boredom, or maybe it was merely a lapse in judgment. But there was something about it that just seemed wrong from the moment it had lain there, half buried in a mountain of old production junk, in a storage room nobody ever used. It was labeled, in smeared black ink, Episode 6, and the whole thing was covered in so much dust, it looked like it hadn't seen the light in 20 years. Now, anyone who's worked with me knows there's no Episode 6 in Unsolved Terrors. There were only 5 episodes, 5 safe, dull episodes, and this series had always been the kind that just barely avoided cancellation. But there it was, Episode 6, the lost episode, the one that was too disturbing to air. It said, I should have just left it there, shoved it back into that cardboard box and walked away. But I didn't. I took it, feeling this weird pull I couldn't shake. Like the tape was somehow waiting for me. I reached home, slumped on the couch, and slid the tape into my old VCR. A weird static hiss filled up the room, rising and falling like some kind of faint breathing. My screen flickered, went black, and after a moment, a blank gray title card popped up, Unsolved Terrors. But there was no theme music, no narration, just dead silence. My hand tightened around the remote as a chill settled over me. I'd seen hundreds of episodes like this one, but something about this was different. The screen flickered to that of a room, dimly lit. It looked dirty, the walls seeming to have been stained from years of smoke and grime. Shadows spread throughout the corners, and the only lighting in the place was coming from a flickering bulb above the iron headboard of an old metal bed. A slouched figure sat on the bed, back to the camera, its head hunched forward. Its body was wrapped in thick gauze, tattered into strips and crusted with dry, dark stains. Blood. I realized. My stomach flipped, and I wriggled in my seat, abruptly feeling queasy. This was wrong, whoever this was. They were covered head to toe in bloodied bandages, layer after layer of it, like they'd been patching themselves up for years with the same dirty rags, like nothing I'd ever seen in true crime. And I'd seen some messed up shit. The camera just stayed on the figure. No movement, no noise, just that dim, flickering light and that unbearable stillness. I began to loosen up. This must be some sort of sick joke of an independent film. But the instant that thought crossed my mind, the figure on the bed jerked. I leaned forward, tension coiling in my chest, as the figure slowly turned, twisting at an unnatural angle. Its head rotated first, creaking to one side, and for a horrible second I thought it would snap right off. When it finally turned to face the camera, I felt my heart hammer against my ribs, every instinct screaming at me to shut it off. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a blank canvas of flesh stretched tight over bone, with faint indentations where features should have been, like someone had taken an eraser to a human face. And yet, somehow, it felt like it was looking at me. There was a strange pulsing beneath the skin, like something was crawling just under the surface, writhing. Holy shit, I muttered, unable to look away, even as a knot of nausea twisted in my gut. The thing on the bed moved again, its head tilting to one side with a sudden, jerking motion. The gauze around its neck strained, fraying slightly, and I caught a glimpse of raw, bloody skin beneath. It raised one arm, the fingers splayed and twitching in quick, violent spasms. They were clawed, ragged, and cracked, like the bones had broken and reset wrong. Every inch of it screamed pain, suffering, something so twisted it made my skin crawl. But the worst part was that the thing began to crawl toward the camera. It moved in short, snapping jerks, its limbs dragging against the mattress. The fabric beneath it darkened, soaked by something thick and black that seeped from the bandages. With each twitching step, I could hear it, the soft, sickening squelch of blood and something else, something slimy. My stomach churned, and I found myself clenching my fists, my nails digging into my palms. The screen shook as the camera zoomed in, closer and closer, until I could see every twitch, every strained tendon in that misshapen body. I could practically feel the weight of its stare, even though it had no damn eyes. I felt like a rabbit caught in headlights, frozen as the thing reached one clawed hand out toward the screen. "Stop," I muttered, barely able to breathe. Just stop." As if it had heard me, the screen flickered and the image went dark. The silence was heavy, so thick I thought my ears would pop. Before I could catch my breath, the screen blinked back on, and this time, the shot was closer. The figure's head filled the frame, only inches from the camera, its blank face impossibly close, the skin twitching and writhing like it was alive. Right where its mouth should have been, the skin started to peel back, slow and deliberate, like flesh tearing. The split widened, revealing a dark, empty void where its mouth should have been, black as midnight. Next, it started to scream. God, the sound. It was low at first, like metal scraping against bone, then rising, louder, a jagged, guttural wail that seemed to dig straight into my skull. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The scream was everywhere, vibrating through my bones, rattling the windows. It was agony, like 1,000 voices crying out in pain, all clawing at each other, desperate and broken. Jesus, Jesus. "Make it stop!" I groaned, my heart slamming against my ribs as I fought to tear my gaze from the screen. But it wouldn't stop. The sound grew louder, clawing deeper, until I thought my head would split open. At that moment, the camera started to shake. The figure's body contorted, limbs jerking in horrific spasms, the blood-soaked gauze unraveling, revealing flesh that looked like it had been chewed up and spat back out. I felt bile rise in my throat, the taste of acid stinging the back of my mouth. My fingers scrambled for the remote, but it wouldn't turn off. The play button blinked in the corner, mocking me, refusing to obey. I was trapped, watching this horror unfold, helpless to escape. The figure leaned even closer, the dark void where its mouth should be stretching wider, wider, until it looked like it could swallow me whole. Suddenly, it started crawling out of the screen. One hand reached forward, its fingers clawing at the edges of the screen. Black sludge oozed down its arm, dripping onto the frame, thick and sticky, pooling onto the floor. The lights in my room flickered, and I could smell it now, a stench of rot, something metallic and foul, filling the air like a dead animal left out in the sun. I stumbled back, my legs hitting the coffee table as I choked on the stench, the taste of it coating my tongue. The screen glitched, cutting in and out, but each time the image returned, the figure was closer, its face, or lack of one, pressed against the screen, bleeding black sludge. Soon, words started to appear, scrawling across the bottom of the screen in dripping, jagged letters. "Let me in." A raw chill clawed up my spine, leaving a burning ache in its wake as the words repeated, over and over, each one searing into my mind. I knew, somehow, that if I stayed any longer, if I kept watching, it would get through. It would find a way. I backed up, stumbling over myself, the taste of bile thick in my throat. In one last act of desperation, I yanked the plug from the wall. The screen went black, the silence heavy, but that smell still lingered, choking and putrid. I stood there, panting, half expecting it to come crawling out of the darkness, to reach out from the shadows and pull me into whatever hell it had come from. But it didn't. The room was empty. I should have thrown that tape away, smashed it, burned it. But as I stood there in the silence, the last of my sanity hanging by a thread, I realized I'd only made it to the end of the first part. I could barely breathe as I stood there, staring at the silent, black screen. The room felt thick with something I couldn't name, like a presence that pressed down on me, heavier with each second. The stench lingered. Too, a sour, metallic rot that clung to the back of my throat. I stumbled to the window, fumbling to open it, desperate for fresh air, but the stink wouldn't leave. It was like it had seeped into my skin. I glanced at the tape. I wanted to chuck it out the window, to watch it shatter in the street and let it be done, but I couldn't. Against every shred of common sense, some sick part of me needed to know what came next. I needed to finish it. Maybe it was just shock, or maybe something in the darkness of that screen had already gotten its hooks into me. With a shuddering breath, I grabbed the remote, turned the TV back on, and hit play. The tape hissed as the screen flickered, static dancing in grainy waves. The room appeared again. The same dingy walls, the same blood-streaked bed, but now it looked worse, like something had rampaged through it. Bloody handprints smeared the walls, dark and dried, with scratches below them, deep and ragged, like something had clawed at the walls, desperate to escape. The light overhead flickered erratically, casting shadows that stretched and warped like long, skeletal fingers across the floor. The camera panned, and my stomach turned as I saw them. A set of footprints, dark and wet, trailing from the bed across the floor and toward a door at the far side of the room. It was slightly open, darkness yawning beyond it like a hungry maw. The camera lingered on the door for a few moments before a noise cut through the silence. A faint, shuffling sound, like something dragging itself along the floor. A low, throaty groan followed, broken and wet, filled with agony. I swallowed, my throat tight, fingers trembling as I watched. The camera shifted, moving toward the door, following the footprints. They grew darker, more twisted, as if whatever had made them was bleeding out with each step. As the camera reached the doorway, it paused, and for a horrible, stretched moment, there was only silence. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing in my skull like a drum. In a sickening, jerky motion, the camera lurched forward, plunging into the darkness. For a moment, all I could see was black. The only sound was that shuffling, dragging noise, closer now, echoing from somewhere deep within the shadows. Gradually, I heard it, a whisper, low, hissing, and layered with voices that overlapped, blending into a chorus of agony. "Let me in," I froze. My entire body locked up as the voices continued, each one sharper, angrier. "Let me in." The camera flickered, and suddenly, the figure was back on the screen. Only now, it was crawling, dragging itself along the floor, limbs jerking with every movement. Its skin was even worse now, raw and split open, black sludge seeping from its wounds, leaving a thick trail behind it. The gauze had mostly unraveled, exposing patches of muscle and bone, glistening and wet, like meat left out to rot. My stomach twisted as the thing inched closer to the camera, its faceless head cocked to one side, and a wet, rasping breath escaped its non-existent mouth. The whispering grew louder, the voices layering, overlapping in a twisted symphony that clawed at my mind. As I watched, horrified, the creature's fingers dug into the floor, gouging deep grooves into the wood as it dragged itself forward. Its head snapped up, tilting at a grotesque angle, and I saw them, tiny mouths, scattered across its skin like sores, each one stretching open to scream, the sound merging into one broken, sickening wail. "God, no," I whispered, bile rising in my throat. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like the thing had me, some invisible force pressing down on me, keeping me rooted to the spot. The figure crept closer, its many mouths twisting and writhing, each one forming silent words that I could feel more than hear, words that crawled under my skin, slithering through my veins. "Let me in, let me in." My vision blurred, my mind reeling as the voices drilled deeper, scratching at the back of my skull like nails. The thing stretched one bloodied hand toward the camera, and with a sudden, sickening lurch, it pressed its head against the screen. Blood and black ichor smeared across the lens, and I felt the room around me grow colder, darker, like the light itself was being sucked away. The creature's head jerked back, and in the faint glow from the screen, I saw it, the outline of a figure in the reflection of my TV. Right behind me, I spun around, my pulse thundering in my ears, but there was nothing, just the empty room. The pale glow of the TV casting shadows that seemed to stretch a little too far, linger a little too long. I was alone, but the feeling didn't leave. The skin on the back of my neck prickled, my heart hammering as I turned back to the screen, almost afraid of what I might see. The screen had gone black again, but faintly, almost hidden in the darkness. Words appeared, scrawled across the screen in bloody, jagged letters. "There is no escape." I stared, breath hitching, my mind struggling to process the words. I wanted to believe it was a trick, some elaborate prank, but deep down, I knew, I felt it. The thing on the screen wasn't just a recording. It was reaching out, clawing its way into my world, my mind, like a virus infecting everything it touched. The screen flickered, showing something that turned my blood to ice. It was my living room. The camera was pointing right at me. The exact angle, the exact lighting, even the slight mess on the coffee table beside me. It was all there. I was on the screen, watching myself, and yet I hadn't moved, hadn't touched the camera. In the corner of the screen, just barely visible, was a shadow. It was tall, with long, twisted limbs, and it was watching me, standing just beyond the edge of the frame. I reached for the remote, heart racing, but the screen changed again. The camera zoomed in, closer to the shadow, and I could see it, the blank, faceless thing, its skin cracked and seeping, heads twisted at odd angles, mouths scattered across its body, each one moving, forming words I couldn't hear but could feel. The screen filled with static, the whispers growing louder, drilling into my head. I grabbed the remote, desperate to turn it off, to escape, but it was too late. The creature on the screen lunged forward, filling the entire frame, its mouth stretching open in a silent scream that seemed to echo in my mind. But then, the screen went black. The silence that followed was thick, absolute. I sat there, heart hammering, struggling to breathe. My hands shook as I fumbled for the remote, the taste of bile sour in my mouth. From somewhere deep within the TV, I heard it, just barely audible, faint but unmistakable, a voice. It was whispering, a sick, wet rasp that made my skin crawl. You can't run. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the blank screen. The darkness around me felt alive, pressing in from all sides, thick and choking. My heart hammered in my chest, my breathing shallow and quick. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get up, to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't move. I felt like I was being watched from all angles, like 100 unseen eyes were boring into my back. That whisper, "You can't run," still echoed in my head, looping over and over like a broken record. Finally, I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady. I glanced around the room, half expecting to see that faceless thing lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to turn my back. But the room was empty, dead silent. Only the faint, flickering light of the TV remained, casting long, warped shadows across the walls. I told myself to leave, to get out of my apartment, to go anywhere but here. But my eyes drifted back to the remote in my hand, fingers trembling as I stared at it. I don't know why, but some twisted part of me needed to finish, to see it through. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was just a sick sense of curiosity. But something told me that if I stopped now, if I walked away, I'd never truly escape. The thing on that screen would follow me, haunt me forever. Taking a shaky breath, I lifted the remote and hit play. The screen flickered to life, the faint crackle of static filling the silence. The familiar, dingy room appeared again, the blood-smeared walls, the empty bed, the single light bulb swinging slightly overhead. But now, the door at the far end was open, revealing a dark hallway beyond. A voice drifted from somewhere deep within the hallway. It was faint, a garbled whisper that sent a chill crawling up my spine. The camera moved forward, creeping through the doorway and into the darkness. I watched as it drifted down the hall, each step revealing more bloody handprints, more scratch marks along the walls. The shadows shifted and twisted, like something was moving just out of sight, something waiting in the darkness, lurking just beyond the edge of the frame. The camera stopped, and in the dim glow, I could just make out a mirror on the wall at the end of the hallway. It was cracked and smeared with something dark, the glass warped, making everything look wrong and twisted. For a moment, I only saw the empty hallway reflected back. In a slow, sickening reveal, a figure appeared in the mirror. It was me. I stared, my stomach churning as I watched my own reflection in the glass, pale and wide-eyed, mirroring the terror that gripped me in real life. But something was wrong. In the reflection, I was smiling. A slow, twisted grin stretched across my face, too wide, too unnatural, baring teeth that seemed sharper, more predatory. My eyes, God, my eyes were black, like twin pits, dark and endless. I could feel them staring back at me, empty and dead, devoid of any hint of humanity. As I watched, the reflection began to move on its own. My smile widened, stretching impossibly far, and I felt a surge of nausea as the me in the mirror lifted a hand and pressed it against the glass. I could almost feel it, a cold, creeping touch pressing against my skin. Then, one by one, other hands appeared in the reflection, reaching out from the darkness behind me, wrapping around my shoulders, my neck, dozens of hands, thin and gray, fingers clawed and bony, all reaching for me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the coffee table, heart racing as the screen went black again. My mind spun, horror tightening around my throat like a noose. I turned, frantically scanning the room, but of course, I was alone. There was nothing there, no hands, no faceless figure. But then the smell hit me, thick, cloying, the unmistakable scent of blood and rot. I gagged, pressing a hand to my mouth as bile rose in my throat. It was overwhelming, the stench filling every inch of the room, clinging to the air, thick and heavy. A moment later, I heard it again, the whisper, louder this time, filling the silence with that same twisted chant. Let me in. Let me in. The lights in the room flickered, and I felt something brush against my neck. A faint, icy touch, like fingers trailing over my skin. I spun around, pulse pounding, but there was nothing there, nothing but shadows. The screen crackled back to life, and my heart skipped a beat as I saw my own living room staring back at me, captured in the eerie, flickering light of the TV. It was an exact mirror image, down to the coffee cup on the table, the pile of books on the floor. But something was different. In the reflection, the lights were off, and the room was drenched in darkness, except for a single figure standing in the center, facing the camera. It was the faceless figure, the same bloody, bandaged monstrosity from the earlier scenes, standing right where I was. It lifted one hand, cracked and bloody fingers pointing directly at me, and I felt a cold wave of dread crash over me. Without warning, it took a step forward. No, 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 I muttered, shaking my head, fingers digging into the couch as I watched the thing in the reflection inch closer to the screen. With each step, its body jerked, contorted, blood dripping from the exposed muscle and bone, pooling at its feet in thick, black puddles. The sound of wet, squelching footsteps filled the room, echoing as it dragged itself forward, its head tilted to the side, and even though it had no eyes, I felt its gaze burning into me. The screen flickered, the image twisting and distorting as if it were struggling to break through, to cross over. My voice trembled. This isn't real. This can't be real. But the figure kept moving, inching closer with each ragged step, and as it neared the screen, I saw something new. My own face, stretched and distorted, pressed against the skin of its blank, faceless head, like it was trying to push its way out. My own eyes stared back at me, wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream, trapped beneath layers of blood-soaked gauze. The screen shook, the image warping as the thing pressed closer, its body jerking and twitching as it raised a bloodied hand and placed it against the glass. For a moment, the room went silent, the only sound my own ragged breathing. In a voice that was somehow both mine and not mine, it whispered, "I am you." The lights in the room died, plunging me into darkness. Panic clawed at my throat, and I staggered back, stumbling over the coffee table and hitting the floor hard. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone, the cold grip of fear freezing my mind. But the screen was dead, blank, no light, no signal. The TV flickered again, the faceless thing's body filling the screen, its mouth splitting open, wider and wider, until it was nothing but an endless black void. And from somewhere deep within that darkness, a scream began, a high, broken wail that filled the room, vibrating through my skull, my bones, rattling the windows. The walls seemed to pulse with it, the sound growing louder, unbearable, like knives scraping against my brain. I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, desperate to block it out. But the scream kept coming, filling every inch of the room, a torrent of agony and rage, of something ancient and hungry. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I opened my eyes, heart hammering, my mind reeling in the dead silence. But the horror wasn't over. The TV screen was black, but in the faint glow, I could make out words, scratched across the glass in jagged letters. I am here. A cold, crawling sensation spread over my skin, and as I stared at the screen, I realized the words weren't just on the TV. They were scrawled across the walls, the ceiling, the floor, every surface in the room, smeared in something dark and sticky. I stumbled back, terror flooding my veins as the lights flickered, dim shadows twisting across the walls. In the corner of my eye, I saw it, the faceless figure, watching me from the mirror, smiling with my mouth, my eyes empty and black. My voice broke, barely a whisper. God, help me. I could barely think as I staggered backward, feeling the weight of a dozen eyes on me, eyes that weren't supposed to exist, eyes that seemed to watch from every shadow, every corner, every twist of darkness in the room. The walls were covered in words, scratched, smeared, dripping. I am here. Let me in. I am you. The air was thick with rot, and the sickly sweet stench of something decomposing filled my lungs. My skin felt cold, prickling with an icy dread that burrowed deep into my bones. My reflection on the TV screen wasn't me anymore. It was that thing, that faceless horror, staring at me with my own eyes, wearing my own twisted grin. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I reached for the remote, clutching it so tightly my knuckles turned white. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe it was sheer terror, but every instinct screamed at me to get rid of it, to end this nightmare. But the TV wouldn't turn off. My thumb mashed the power button, again and again, but the screen stayed on, that horrible reflection frozen, grinning back at me with a smile that was too wide, too wrong. The reflection's skin began to stretch, twisting into impossible shapes, like something inside was pushing, fighting to break free. It started to move. The thing on the screen leaned forward, pressing closer to the glass, the skin on its face peeling back like paper, revealing strips of red, raw flesh beneath. It raised a hand, smearing the screen with black sludge as its fingers traced the inside of the glass, as if it were testing, searching for a way through. A voice whispered in the air, layered with dozens of others, overlapping, garbled. Let me in. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the coffee table, eyes fixed on that thing as it pressed harder, its face distorting, stretching the glass outward, bending it like it was trying to push through, to crawl out and take its place in my world. I could feel it now, a cold, sickening presence creeping through the room, wrapping around me like a pair of invisible hands. The TV screen bulged, cracking, spiderweb fractures spreading out from the center. I could hear it now, the slow, steady crackle of glass, the faint sound of wet, broken breaths seeping from the speakers. Without thinking, I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a heavy book from the coffee table, and hurled it at the screen. The glass shattered, splintering into 1,000 pieces, and the screen went dark. For a moment, there was silence. The weight in the air lifted slightly, and I felt a faint, desperate flicker of relief. Then I saw it. The darkness in the shattered screen wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, pulsing, seething, like a black ocean roiling just beyond the glass. Shadows twisted and churned, and I could see faces, hundreds of them, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with horror. They stretched and twisted, their forms blurring, merging into something massive, something hungry. The whispers started again, louder this time, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. Let us in, let us in, let us in. The shadows spilled out from the broken screen, pouring into the room like smoke, thick and suffocating. They crawled across the walls, the floor, twisting up toward the ceiling, covering every inch of the room in darkness. I could feel it wrapping around me, sinking into my skin, filling my lungs. My vision blurred, the air growing colder with every passing second. I stumbled back, gasping, clawing at my throat as the darkness closed in, the whispers filling my ears, my mind. That's when I saw it, standing just beyond the edge of the shadows, watching me with my own eyes, was my reflection. It grinned, wide and crooked, my lips stretching into a smile that wasn't mine. It raised a hand, waving, mocking, and I could feel its presence, feel it crawling into my mind, sinking into every corner of my thoughts. I backed up, feeling the shadows tightening around me, pressing in, smothering me. Please. No. My voice was barely a whisper, choked with terror, my hands shaking as I pressed them against my ears, trying to drown out the whispers. But the voices only grew louder. There is no escape. We are here. We are you. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering as the darkness swallowed me, dragging me down, down into an endless void. The whispers filled my ears, my mind, my soul, each one tearing away a piece of me, leaving nothing but a hollow shell. Suddenly there was silence. I opened my eyes. The room was empty. The TV was off, the shadows gone. The walls were blank, no words, no blood, nothing. I blinked, the horror slowly fading, replaced by a cold, creeping numbness. It felt like a dream, like I'd been ripped from reality and shoved back, left with nothing but a hazy, fragmented memory of something I couldn't understand. But then I caught my reflection in the dark, blank screen, and I knew it wasn't over. My reflection stared back, wearing a smile that didn't belong to me.